I'm psychologist Dr. Bryan Violet, and today I'll be sitting down with Bobby Angel. He is an author, Catholic minister, podcaster, content creator, and he is now a graduate of the CPMAP program and a certified Catholic mentor with Catholic Psych. He wears many, many hats. We'll be discussing his new book, Gaming in the Heroic Life. We'll be talking about his career in podcasting and content creation with his wife, his experience in the CPMAP, and of course, our sinner in a movie, Gladiator. This is the Catholic Sinner Show.
Gaming in the Heroic Life.
Gaming in the Heroic Life.
Yeah, the title gives me pause.
Go on.
I like it a lot. I mean, it calls me to something. Who doesn't like the word heroic? Well, what man doesn't like the word heroic? I feel called, and I think there's something about that in the world of gaming where we feel called. Why did you choose the title? How did you choose the title?
Well, originally it was video games and the virtuous life, but the thought was virtue is that might be too big of a word. Like if you're trying to get to like the broader audience at stake, virtue could be limiting. Now you're still talking about virtue, and virtue plays a big role in the book, but the surface level of that is to be a hero. Like we want to be a hero. We want to be the main character in the quest, and to an extent we are in our lives. And so we got it down to gaming in the heroic life because that really got to the broadest appeal possible, we pray, to get to reach people. Because I was raised cradle Catholic and was the altar server, yawning my way through mass, daydreaming, couldn't wait to get home to play PlayStation. Yes. Like that was more real.
Has anything changed?
now I have 5 kids who are in my way of the PlayStation.
You still want to get to that PlayStation though.
There's still the ache to go on the quest, to be on the journey, and yes. The religion piece is now infinitely more real. But I still delight in video games. I still play some of the current titles today, and it's been wonderful as well to slowly introduce our kids into it with prudence. Like our 9-year-old just got a Switch, and so introducing her to like, okay, like you prioritize your school and your prayer and socializing, playing outside, and then the gaming is like a cherry on top. Because I know how easily it gets sucked in. We can get sucked in, and it becomes the whole cake.
I've never been sucked into games before.
Of course you haven't. Of course you haven't.
I love your point that in the book, which is like, yeah, they're pretty much built to be addictive. They're designed to addict you. So the pitfalls, I mean, you highlight the pitfalls a little bit, and the answer is virtue development.
Yeah, because it's the same thing. You tell someone if they're going to Vegas to go gambling, like the human condition being what it is, and these machines and the developers behind them getting more and more sophisticated. You have to know thyself, as Socrates told us so long ago. And St. Thomas More said, a man should not go where he's tempted. And he said that before the internet. So there is a sense of like, know thyself. If this particular game, and I've met people like World of Warcraft was just too much. Like they knew it just sucked up too much time. And then when they became like a father, they had to start really setting limits, if not just kind of piecing out completely. And to the extent, again, younger and younger people are gaming, which again, is part of the culture. It's not going anywhere, but we're not teaching self-control. And again, especially the mobile games, because there's something about the console, like you turn it off, whatever, but like if it's on the phone, it's with us everywhere. And those games, especially like the free to play games where they start out free, but they are banking on a subset of people becoming addicted to the point of paying real world money for skins, for
cosmetics.
cosmetics, but for like, oh, I can't get past this level unless I actually pay $5 to get the whatever.
Uh,
It's like they're banking on,
that's
they know that
cheesy.
the majority of people aren't going to pay money. However, those that will are going to pay a whole lot more than just a one-time purchase of the cartridge would have been.
The world of microtransactions.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The iOS gaming platform, the cell phone gaming platform, they love that, don't they? That's
Yeah.
that's that's cheap. Real gamers do not respect the iOS gaming experience.
There's some fun ones, but I'm still an old man at heart. I like my controller, and I have friends who are on the PC side and swear by the keyboard, and it's the Catholic both and. I'll say that.
Are you not a PC gamer at all?
No, I'm an old console kind of guy.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was for a long, long time. I was console only, and I switched to PC when I went to graduate school because I wanted to play Lord of the Rings online, and that was the only way. And we never had a nice computer in my home growing up, and I tried like Star Wars Galaxies. I tried to play, but the computer, the machine never played it. But then when I got to graduate school, I had a laptop for graduate purposes, and it
Sure.
was just enough to play Lord of the Rings online. And I was intimidated by the keyboard and all the keys, but it's just like a gaming console controller where, once upon a time it was just two buttons.
Right. Right.
But sooner or later, that muscle memory kicks in, and you're not even thinking about it. And so that's what happened to me on the PC. It's interesting. You mentioned World of Warcraft. I think you said gamers are getting younger, but I also think gamers are getting older.
Yes. Yeah. So that there too, the dedication in the book is for all the young and not so young gamers out there. God sees you and loves you and desires your best life possible, because now we who've grown up playing from 8-bit to 16-bit to 32 to here we are today are now 30s and 40s, and it's kind of cool. It's just it's not this like outcast thing in your mom's basement hobby. It is
Yes,
now like
that's what it
we who
was
are,
once.
yeah, like we who are parents are now having to figure out we still love gaming, and how do we introduce it in a healthy way to our kids. Sorry, you were saying.
And no, and kids don't have that stigma either that we had when we were young.
Right.
It's just accepted as part of culture and life, so they have no issue. Um, I think that the older, I'm thinking about World of Warcraft and games like that, where the older population uh, has been slowed down by the busyness of life of having kids and jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, the gaming industry, Blizzard and World of Warcraft, and a lot of games like that, have tried to respond to that by watering down the games.
Mm.
And so you can either pay to progress, or they just make it simple, or they take what took 12 hours to do a raid and they'll break it up into 1 hour segments, and you don't have to find a group of people that you socialize with. You can just pop into a raid with random people and then play for an hour and then leave, turn the game off. But the old the get off my lawn types bemoan the loss of all the pain and suffering that went into success, that led up to the success and achievement within these games. So it's like, I don't have the time, but I still wish I was 16 and had the time. So it's an interesting mix.
It's the back in my day attitude. Like
Yeah.
Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters had a great commentary some years ago about the whole American Idol fad, and it's like the get famous quick route. Because he's like, listen, in my day you had to earn it. You had to like sweat
Yeah.
it in a garage, and you had to sound awful, and you had to pay your dues, and then here you are. And it's the same kind of like, yeah, I don't have the time like I once was, but I still should be expected to grind like the old days.
Right. Yes. Can I just grind in the hours of time that I have to grind, but it's just enough, not too much.
Then it's honest. Like,
Yeah.
don't put the bumpers on the bowling lane. Let me earn my strike.
Let me suffer. Yeah. But a lot of those games have been watered down. So you said that you still play games. You're a console gamer. What types of games do you like to play?
I tend towards the solo adventure games when I have time. So I've played most of the Assassin's Creed series.
Mhm.
I played the Horizon Zero Dawn game. I played the new like God of War games. Those are phenomenal. The first one especially is just a masterpiece. The soundtrack to the gameplay to like the father son story happening. And the games I replay are the ones where I really love the protagonist. And Red Dead Redemption 2. Like I bookend one chapter of the book with Arthur Morgan, who's
Yeah.
one of my um most favorite fictional characters ever created, like from literature to movies to games. Like Arthur Morgan is just, and that story is in just a different class. But so those are the games I typically play and replay, and having 5 kids now, I also just tend to replay games than go to new ones, because
Mm.
then I really get invested in the story. Like I don't know where the story's going, and I'll find myself like daydreaming in the daytime. Like I want to know what happens next. Like there's a new Spider-Man game that is um is coming out, or I think it is out by the time this show airs. But the first, like the Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 4, it took so many different turns than the normal Spider-Man lore of where you
Yes.
thought certain villains were going. It told an original story. And I found myself daydreaming during the daytime about the game, not because I wanted to play it. I did, but I wanted to know what happened next.
Mm.
Like I didn't think they were going to go that direction, and wanting to know where the story went. And so especially if I have a task, if there's a thing I'm trying to finish, I just have to know myself and not start a new game. I have to like just replay an old game that I don't really care about and I can relax with, because otherwise there's a mental excitement.
That's how the late night gaming happens. Just one more turn,
One
right?
more
Just
hour. One
one
more
more
hour.
hour, depending on the game. There's those real time strategy games that are sandbox, open ended, like Civilizations. A lot of people play those games,
Right.
and you're basically creating the game as you're playing, based on just the variables of the game. You're creating a civilization, and so you're creating your own miniature goals, long term goals, short term goals, and you have to uh, multitask and you have to plan ahead. So just one more turn, I'm going to finish this task. But in order to do that, you're planning for the one after that. So I can't. Those are games I actually can't play. I
Right.
will, because it'll be 3 a.m. It's dangerous for me. You ever
Well,
played those types?
oh yeah, yeah, and me too. And that's where my wife has gone to Vegas a couple times, and she does some of the slots, but she likes the food, and I just have no desire to go, because I'm like, I know, like,
Mm,
just $10 or just $50 is not going to end there. Like, it's best I stay away. And I've
mm,
had those times where like the God of War games, they have like these Valkyries, which are really tough side bosses,
yeah,
and they'll throttle you. And I get so close to beating them, and I don't. And it's like, "Oh, one more turn," and like an
yeah.
hour has gone by, and I have not beaten this Valkyrie yet. And I'm watching like my sleep slowly trickle away. Um, but I get into the book as well of like, play is a good thing, and I think we could, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole per se, but like the difference between amusement and leisure.
Yeah.
Like, there's good, because they don't mean the same thing in the classical sense of it. Because amusement is just kind of, I'm exhausted from work, I put on the TV, and I'm not looking to exercise any agency. I just want to passively receive. And leisure is a much more active, like I'm walking in the woods. And I'll be the first to say, all things being equal, I think a walk in the woods is more leisurely, is going to build up, put more energy in your tank than an hour of PlayStation will. And I'm not saying at all like the PlayStation is bad, it's evil, it's wrong. I'm just think like the human condition, how we're meant to recharge, tends to happen more in the world than through pixels on a screen.
Well, it's play, isn't it? I mean, gaming is play, and play is work without stress. So it's going to naturally be depleting. We have to work. We love working. We work on our salvation through work. And so even in our off hours, hobbies are essentially work.
Yep.
Gaming is work, just without the stress. So yeah, it doesn't fill you up. It depletes you. And there's nothing wrong with being depleted as long as you have replenishment, right?
And that's the knowing of thyself of like, I only have an hour. I only have an hour and a half to game. Is kind of like the play does reach, it blows off steam. Like the
Well,
kids,
when you sat down, it was an hour, and then you got to about 45 minutes, and you said to yourself, "I have an hour and a half."
and then the bargaining. Well, I only need 7 hours for my REM cycle. Well, I only need 5.5 to function.
Well,
well.
I don't have that busy of a day tomorrow.
I mean, I do it still. It's
Yeah.
but all that to say, like the play is important, and there is like blowing off steam at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy it, and it's life giving, and my wife gets it. Like, there's not this, because she's had her own journey of like, okay, her husband likes video games, he hasn't given them up yet.
Yet.
Well, because there is
Is she still holding out?
No, she's not at all, because she's very competitive with Mario Kart. Like,
Oh,
she does
nice.
not let our children win.
Are you better than her?
No, because Mario, well, yes. But Mario Kart just always like screws you with the items.
Yeah.
Like, you could be doing a flawless run, but the guy in 4th or 5th place is getting all the blue shells and all the red shells, and you're getting a banana. So
There's luck. There's luck involved in Mario Kart for sure.
yeah, there's so she's very competitive. She is the one more race. So she knows, she gets it. She doesn't wag a finger at me. But for me, there is that like self-mastery, self-control thing too, of like, this play is good. And then playing with my kids is good now, as I getting to play Mario Kart with them. And then also demonstrating to them, okay, now there's a time to turn it off. There's a time to re-engage with the world around us. We gotta pray, do our devotional. We gotta like be outside. And so that's my hope is from the writing of the book to even being as a husband and father, is modeling that hope for like integration. It's not this, because this is the book I've been waiting for someone else to write, and no one else was doing it, so I said, fine, I'll write it, of this like Catholic approach
honestly,
to video games.
That was something I was going to say to you today. I'm so glad you wrote this book.
Yeah,
because I've been waiting for someone to write it, and I have no intention of ever writing a book, but sometimes there's a part of me that's like, write something, so I'm very appreciative, because I think it needs it. What is contained within your book has needed to be said. And what I liked about, there's a few things I liked about your book. There's many things I liked, but things that stuck out to me is you're focusing on gaming, but you sprinkle in a little Catholicism here and there, and you teach. And whether it's the concept of virtue, whether it's the concept of narrative, which I'd like to talk about, in story. There's one quick statement you made about marital satisfaction being higher with couples that game together. Did that interest you, strike you? I thought that was important.
It could have been a whole nother chapter on itself, but I tried to. It was interesting, like even discovering that, where it wasn't just one spouse disappears and does this thing, but like, we are doing this together. And then, of course, there's also the unhealthy excess of like, you can't detach from this thing, and it's hurting our marriage. And then you need to be receptive to, okay, like maybe this thing I do need to step away from. But on the whole, again, if you can enjoy an activity together, it's like we both enjoy like rock climbing or bicycling. Like, I get to do this with my beloved.
It's very male bonding, isn't it? We talk about how female bonding is direct.
Yes.
It's you and I looking at each other, and male bonding is you and I looking at it together. As long as there's some, like even just between two men, as long as there's some, hey, how's it going? How you doing? Maybe 10% of the time where we have that I-thou dynamic, we're very comfortable learning about each other just by talking about that object that is independent of us. And so if you have a woman that's willing to enter into that space, it really helps us feel connected, actually.
Even just and that's the advice I give to parents, is like to ask your kid, like, what do you enjoy about this game? Like, don't come out the gate wagging a finger, but say, hey, why do you love that game so much? In genuine love. Like, I want to know what you love about this thing. Help me enter your world.
Yeah.
And it helps the young person feel received and understood. And it doesn't mean you have to pretend to like it. It just means like you show interest. And I've seen, this is another reason I wrote the book, was in this kind of came to light as it was coming together, was this could really be a healing resource for families, because I've seen families where this is
Sure.
this is like a topic that is a rift. The kids feel misunderstood, they feel resentful, the parents are afraid because my kid is going to be violent, or my kid is going to be so detached from reality and not going to be able to function.
Right.
And it's like, listen, like, let's meet each other, let's talk about this. um and I also can't give black and white rules, because every family has to discern for themselves. Every person has to discern from themselves, like, what's your limit? Like, what is enough? What is too much? What types of games, etc.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned in your book that the research shows that video games do not actually make kids more violent.
Right.
But that was a narrative for a long time.
That's, I mean, I was born mid 80s, and so I grew up, like, come of age in like the Mortal Kombat days of the 90s. And there was this fear of, like, and it was the scapegoat, and still to this day, if there's less and less I see, but like for a long time, if there was, any kind of tragedy around a school shooting, well, it was video games that are to blame. And as a like lifelong gamer, I'm like, that doesn't like make sense though. Like, just, and I can never put it to words, but then you do the research and it's like, no, it doesn't equate. Our kids will be violent. Our kids will be detached from reality. If anything, it helps blow off steam. It helps to connect you potentially with other people. Now, it doesn't mean it's healthy connection with anyone on the internet, of course, but
Yes.
like those myths don't really bear out, and it's usually just trying to find a quick scapegoat to a deeper problem within the family, within um, rejection or psychosis,
Or
or
avoidance.
all the above. It's usually a cocktail of like fatherlessness and then rejection. And one tragic case was like, I forget if it was World of Warcraft or a similar game, but it was like that was the one lifeline the young man had, was, this is the one community that hasn't rejected me.
Well, I'll tell you as an aside, those MMO games, and I've played my fair share, are not good games.
Hmm.
That's not why people play them.
Right. Technically, like from a either like, yeah, graphical or
Mechanical.
mechanical standpoint, they are not the highest pinnacle of games.
No. But why do people play them?
The community.
Community.
Yep.
Yeah. What keeps you coming back is chatting with the person that you hung out with the day before and learning about their lives and a shared goal. But
Well,
yeah,
it's the bowling alley. Like, it's the bowling league of today.
yes.
And I mean, I was a teacher for almost 10 years. And when COVID hit, COVID was miserable for students and teachers alike. But I talked to students that were like, Mr. Angel, I was Mr. Angel then. Um, like, I'm not allowed to play outside. Gaming is the only way I have to play with my friends. And so it's this like, you shouldn't play games, but at the same time, like, well, this is safe. But and there too was like, but I saw young people that like around, like, they connected, like this guy had a squad that he played with every day at like 4:30, and it had like a guy from South America, had a guy from like Canada, and it's the shoulder to shoulder. Yeah, the task may be dumb, it may be mindless, but we're in it together. And guess what? Real talk happens. Like,
Real talk happens.
the more you just kind of are in it, doing this thing together, um, eventually you start talking about real things. Eventually, like,
Yes.
over the headphones, you hear like someone's uncle died, and
Yes.
it gets real. It's like, hey, you doing all right, man? Like, you okay? Like, and these this is why I don't know like how to like word it right or navigate it, but it's like the real world friends aren't the only real friends. Like just because a
No,
friendship is virtual, it doesn't mean it's not real.
no, and in fact, not a small percentage of the guests that I want to have in the show uh, come from my history with gaming and people that I've met online. It, in some ways, you can grow closer than your in-person friends because of the frequency of contact. Now, I do think that there's something sacramental about relationships that lean towards that in-person corporeal contact. And most friends that I have talked to online or I met online and gamed with online where there's any substance to the relationship, uh, there's always at least a question of, hey, you should come out and hang out. Hey, when am I going to see you in person? Oh, you're driving through? Stop by. Let's have lunch. And I have friends that I see in person at least once a year, a few times a year that I met online. It's
And I
beautiful.
and that is just so evident and evidence to me of like, yeah, the Catholic thing, like this the sacramentality of our existence. The virtual is not enough. It is great. Thanks be to God for this era we're in, for these tools we have. Of course, it's a double edge, so there's a lot of evil and a lot of the
Sure.
awfulness that can be used for. But that sacramental nature of like, it's not enough to just have this virtually. It's like, hey, let's hang out in real life. Like, hey, let's have a meetup. Like, there's Twitch streamers I know that's like, I'm gonna be in this town. Let's do a meetup. Like, because there is something that it's like the communion of saints almost. It's like we we share this thing, and that's great. How about we be together?
Yeah, I'm going to do the get off my lawn type of thing for a moment because online gaming, where communities develop online, is a wonderful thing. And it grew out of a need uh, of wanting to play socially with others when there wasn't anyone else around locally, like
Mm,
in your hometown amongst your friends. But I hate that there's no couch co-op anymore.
mm,
That experience. I mean, there's some random titles. I think Nintendo does a decent job, and I think it's better for families than most other consoles,
yeah,
where it's you're sitting in a room together playing a game. But that was the first 10 years of my gaming life, at least, before they started introducing online gaming, and it's great for identity. You know, if you don't have any friends that play video games from your hometown, you can find people who are similar to you out in the world in the digital space. But sometimes games that should clearly be a couch co-op game don't even give you that option anymore.
right, right.
It's really, I think something is lost there. There's nothing like sitting on a couch and turning on the console and playing with your friends.
It's incarnate. And it used to be, yeah, who's in the neighborhood, who can come over to play GoldenEye, and
Yes.
who's fighting over Odd Job. You just
No,
slap
he's
the
out. He's out. He can't be out. Job.
my
He's
neighbor
outlawed.
my neighbor would do instant kill, and he'd demand to be Odd Job on turbo mode, and would run in and like just like chop you and leave, and the blood is running down the screen, and then it turned into like LAN parties when I was in college,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, it's like they were there in the room, and I think, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. And at the very least, at least there are like meetups to bring the largely virtual back to real life a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Who did you write this book for? Because listen, as I was reading it, as a gamer, a part of me was like, yeah, I know. Like you said, when you heard the narrative that video games were dangerous, the gamer in you was like, no, they're not. So this is not a book for gamers. Who is this a book for?
Hmm. It is a. I'll put it in like a three prong here. One, it's a book for younger me. It's the whole like research is me search thing.
I
It's
was
like,
gonna go there.
yeah, I'm
Are you working
guilty.
through some stuff with this book?
I guess.
It's
I
great.
guess.
It's
Ooh.
it's great. It's great. It's great.
It is. I mean, and my story's in it. My story's in it, in the sense of being this gangly teenager who was not good at ball sports, and all my peers, it was like baseball and football and soccer, and if you couldn't do that, you weren't a guy. And I figured out I could run very quickly. I was fast, so I could get away from danger quickly. So that was my
Mm.
skill set, was like running and swimming. But gaming was kind of like, I can excel here, and I never really understood what this has to do with God and my cradle Catholic religion. So for all the young people, so it's for myself, it's for like the young people. I've done youth ministry ever since I got out of it, because that's really where I had my conversion. That's really where I woke up to the reality of God's existence, and I've always wanted to give back to the young adult, teen bracket. So for that altar server type who's yawning his way through mass and doesn't understand what God and religion has anything to do with the game I love, it's
Yes.
for that person, as well as families, like the parents who are do find the subject to be a bit of a rift in the relationships, and need to see like a comprehensive view of the topic.
Yeah. I love that first point. And I come from a generally secular background before I had my reversion in maybe my early 20s, which wasn't that long ago. Uh, and
Sure, Dad.
I could, looking back on my history growing up and all, and the world that I encountered, I can see how God was calling to me through the world and my experience in the world, and that I was looking for Him in different things. Gaming would be one of them. That's why I wanted to have you on here. It's a perfect fit for the Catholic Sinner Show, right? Uh, and so, how to make sense of being in the world and seeing all of our experiences as reflective of that deep desire and longing for God is that's the sweet spot, because it doesn't end with video games. I mean, it's everything we do, and it never ends throughout the course of our lives, even if it's unconscious. You know, we're pursuing Him, and He's not just an idea; He's an acting agent, so He can reach us through any medium He wants, and I believe He does.
Well, and I'd say gaming possesses some of the best stories of today. And we're made for these great narratives. We're made for good versus evil. We're made for the hero's journey.
Mhm.
And to some extent, the game developers understand this better than our clergy do, in terms of beckoning young people forward. Like, you have a purpose and a quest and a mission. Only you can save the town from the evil dragon. Um, says the NPC walking in circles, nearby. And so there was always a sense of like, I have purpose in these games. I don't understand how I have it in the church. And thanks be to God for really good people in my path who helped me connect those dots, and that Jesus is alive and is the Son of God. And though we are sinners, He's called us by name to know Him and be fully alive. And that doesn't, and Pope Benedict has a beautiful line too of to love Christ, to fall in love with the Lord. It doesn't take anything away. He takes everything and transforms it for its good. So even video games, sometimes there's a purgative uh, period we have to go through where do have to get rid of some of these things which are stumbling blocks. Um, some people are called to stay in that, but for some it's more reactive, in the sense of like, I've met people who, like, grown adults who kind of have this like, oh, video games. And there's this tinge of, though, of like, you used to love games and then something happened.
Mm.
Like, what happened? And
Mm.
usually you don't have the time or the
That's what it
longevity
is.
to get into it. But it's like, at some point,
The criticism becomes you are immature and you should be spending your time with more responsible matters from that perspective, from that angle.
and my hope is that this book rattles some of those conversations too. Because I'm expecting some of the pushback of like, all games are a waste of time. you should spend all your free time praying, and anything that is not of reading the imitation of Christ is leading us backwards. And if
or in between though, sometimes it's psychological, that space. It's not just you're either reading the imitation of Christ or video games. It's like you should only be outside, or you should only be having live, real analog conversations with people, or there's a lot of space in between, I think.
right, yeah, there's a spectrum of like you should be doing XYZ, and I think that's where every person has to discern, every family has to discern what is God calling us to. And there are some that's like no media is what God is calling our family to. Great. Um, but I'm very interested in those who there is a reactive, like, you used to love the joy that video games brought you. You used to love the community aspect, and something happened, and it became this like exiled part that had to go off, and because now I am called to other things, to spiritual things, to whatever, and there's this like discomfort with the topic now. And that's something that is just one of those like those conversations will take time to get to like what's going on there, that um a second look at like there can be truth in video games, there can be beauty, there can be goodness, is uncomfortable. So I hope those conversations can happen too.
It would seem that for those people and others, it's not even just about the video game. It's not just about gaming. That's just content, right?
Right.
Maybe we'll talk about the CP map later, but there's a difference between content and process, and content and dynamic, the bigger process going on with people. And so gaming might be the content for some people, but what you're pointing to, you could fill in gaming with anything. What's this part of yourself that you're exiling, that used to bring you joy, and that you no longer allow yourself to tap into, and your life becomes one solely of duty? It becomes agape without eros, without enjoyment and the emotional life and passion. And if it happens to be gaming, and for the purposes of this conversation is gaming, wonderful. But I think that applies to many different things
Oh,
in people's
totally.
lives.
So I discerned the priesthood for a few years after college. I was a firefighter and EMT. I was running away from God in that time period, and I eventually relented, and I said, "Okay, I got to go answer this priesthood question, if I'm called to be a priest or not." And so I
Yeah.
entered the seminary, and in my first year, I met a guy. He came up in my room, and he's like, "Hey, is that Coldplay?" And Coldplay was playing on my laptop, and I said, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, I got rid of all my secular music years ago." And it was like he couldn't see my face because he was behind me, but it was this moment of like eye twitching and just like, "Come, Lord Jesus." And this is what I mean. Like if he is called to that, praise the Lord. But there was this like still kind of purgative reactionary of like keep it at an arm's length. And I mean, I am just
Did you
much
feel
more.
defensive in those moments? I
I, d-
think
I
I have felt defensive in those moments.
and that too is like, yeah, apply that from music to gaming, where people do paint a broad brush of like the young people today and their social media and their video games and whatever. And I do have a when those comments are said in such sweeping, just like uh I don't know the right word for it, but like I do
Just
find
broad strokes. Yeah.
yeah, I do find a defensive part of me. It's like, hey, hold on, wait a minute. Like, you're categorizing a whole lot in that just dismissal. Um, but there too is that like again the curiosity of, okay, that's interesting. This guy got rid of all his secular music, or meeting people that I can tell like there's a little kid, like you used to delight in games, but you have now pushed them out over here. Now this is, yeah, you're in this position or stage of like duty, and my hope is just to like take a second look, and it may not be your cup of tea, it may not be what God's calling you to, but don't dismiss where there is beauty and community and goodness in games.
Well, I think we have to leave space for that as a part of anyone's journey.
Yeah.
We don't know where that young man ended up. In my own life, I went through a period of no music, no video games. And I wasn't being hard on myself. I wasn't being rigid. I just became more concerned with other things. Like I became more concerned with spiritual matters, sports too, for me. I do enjoy sports. And then when I think ultimately I was looking for God in the wrong places. But then when I started to develop my Catholic faith and my spiritual life, then I was able to look at those other activities uh, through a new lens and to see them as something more than an end, but what can be used temperately as a means to a deeper understanding of myself, to a deeper understanding of other people, a way for communion with others. You know, I often think about gaming or the potential for gaming as a personality test, both in terms of content, what types of games do you like,
Right.
and genre, like MMOs versus console games or single player games versus multiplayer games, you know, strategy games versus, you know, first person shooters. And what does it say about the individual that they are attracted to a particular genre? Have you thought about that?
I would love to know what you think about me in this
Hmm.
my genres of choice, because I have friends that they'll just play FIFA or Madden is kind of where they stop, and I'll sink 80 hours into Red Dead, and I just get lost. Like the mission is over here, and I get lost for like 3 hours just traveling in nowhere land.
Sure. So you like that sort of space to spread out in a game. You don't stay on the rails. You like the Skyrims of the world, the Red Deads of the world,
Yeah,
where it's like a RPG, but you're not necessarily limited to the main storyline.
yeah, the sandbox, big games.
Listen. I this would be armchair psychoanalysis here, but because I don't know you at that level, but I mean, you tell me. Do you is I would imagine that there's something that feels liberating and free for you to not have to paint between the lines and give it and it's as if you're given space and autonomy and power to make your own choices and your own decisions, all still within the confines of a game.
Right.
There is a frame, but it's not your. There's more agency. I would say is agency an important concept for you in the broader picture of your life?
Yeah. Yeah. To the extent that a game has constraints, the games that make you feel free and that there's more to be explored.
Hmm.
We've
So
Google Earth.
the discovery piece is important to you.
Yeah, we've Google Earth so much of the planet. What's left to explore? And
Well, the
a lot of
ocean.
these,
That's about it.
yeah, the depths of the ocean, or you want to go to Mars. But these games, like they start with the map like all clouded, and as you go, it starts to reveal itself. You're piecing it together. Yeah, so there is totally this kind of like what's over that hill exploration.
That's cool. That's cool. Ah, it's part of the adventure. For me, I cannot play one player games. I try. I believe me. I give it the old try. I have a lot of gaming friends, and they recommend games to me. And no matter how good it is, I'm talking Game of the Year.
Right,
I'm
right.
talking Zelda, God of War. I mean, these amazing games. I go like 2, 3 days, and then I say to myself, "What? There's no one here. I'm alone in it, and I want to connect with someone about it." And for me, it's the task completion with a group of people or PvP, but that's toxic. That's another topic. Player versus player for our non-gamer audience. It's when you're playing against someone, or at least in teams against other people.
Which we talked about a couple weeks ago, just off in talking about being like this show happening. And I had never conceptualized that of like when you're playing with other people, it is either collaborating together for a task or it is fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you leave with two very different dispositions. And I don't think I don't think I had ever like consciously thought about that.
Well, I have a growing theory that player versus player is akin to the One Ring.
Hmm.
No matter how good you are, eventually it will destroy you.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone that exclusively PvPs that feels good afterwards or is happy about them. Even if they win, even if there's always something better. And so it's this constant comparative analysis between yourself and other people. And even if you have a successful period of defeating others, it's never enough. It's like a cup with a hole at the bottom that you're filling. And it brings out parts of ourselves that are dangerous, that are toxic, that are critical. Whenever you start to rank yourself above other people, I mean, in the most extreme of scenarios, it's I'll do whatever it takes. And that's how you have hackers that don't even play by the rules of the game. They just want to make sure that they beat you. I never understood that. I wanted to compete within what is fair, but it's part of the same trajectory of I will only feel good about me if I'm better than you.
Hmm.
And that's in any walk of life, but it definitely shows up in gaming. And the Ring of Power is all about lording over others, and it does corrupt you eventually.
Versus the collaborative play, which is we're in this shoulder to shoulder as a team.
Yes,
And yeah, it's very, yeah.
that
Thank you for
can get
that.
toxic.
That was sure, of course it can. But that was one of those like, oh, I wish I would have put that in the book if we would have had that conversation sooner. But it's for the
Yeah,
next one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The toxicity in collaborative group play is it can become our group against another group, another
Right.
guild,
Hmm.
another raid, another team, and if you're not pulling your weight, then maybe I don't care about how you feel. Maybe you're out of the group. Maybe I kick you out. Right? Some of the top level gaming guilds in World of Warcraft, I mean, the level of time, energy, and toxicity, it's very unhealthy, those communities.
Yeah.
But then you find some that are a little bit casual and social. And in those communities, they typically don't complete tasks very well
Right.
because they don't put in the work, you know? So the sweet spot is people who are serious but don't take it too serious. It's hard to find those communities in the collaborative play.
Especially as we get older, as tired dads.
For sure. For
Although
sure.
although the nursing homes of the future are going to be filled with guys with arthritis in their thumbs, with The Office on repeat in the corner.
Oh, yes. I've seen, was it Counter Strike?
Hmm.
They play Counter Strike in that's a first person shooter game where it's being played in nursing homes now, and there's like geriatric populations blowing each other up with grenades. I appreciate that because obviously, as I'm getting older and my reaction time is slowing,
Yeah, yeah.
I can't play with the young bucks anymore. So an over 40 league sounds great to me. All right. Well, I do want to selfishly shift a little bit towards podcasts
Let's
and
go.
podcasting
Let's do it.
because I'm starting one. I don't know if you knew that. And uh, everything I've heard about content creation uh, uh, proposes that you're going to suck in the beginning, no matter what. You're just going to suck at this. And your first episode is not going to look anything like your 100th episode or even a year later, even, no matter how many episodes it is. You just get better. So, my question for you is what what has been the most challenging area of growth for you in this space? What have you had to work on within yourself to get better at what you do?
Allowing that perfectionistic part of me to chill.
Hmm.
Especially just the desire to get the like your wording totally right, the perfect
Yeah.
thumbnail, the you have to let it go. Like it's and the beautiful thing about the age we're in and the ability to create content like we are is you keep growing. And it's true. The first content looks nothing like the 50th episode or the 100th episode, and you can cringe at some of it, but it's how else are you going to learn? It's like it's the athlete, like just figuring out the basics versus making it to the pros, and you still got to go back and make sure the basics are down.
Yeah.
But the expectation of perfection is crippling.
Can be.
And to kind of like just let it go. And authenticity is a overused word, but Joseph Pieper had, you know a lot of people know as like his Leisure, the Basis of Culture, but he's got a bunch of other books out there, and he and oh, Charles Taylor as well talked a little bit about authenticity as like, don't you can look at what other people have done and emulate what you like, but you also got to figure out what are you trying to say
Yeah.
and be yourself. And that was the advice I was given in starting out, was like, just be yourself and be consistent, because the other temptation is like, it's hard. um it's hard to keep up the episodes, it's hard to keep going, um especially because majority of shows, if they reach some level of success and sustainability, it's after like 2 to 5 years. So you think about that, like it's a lot of grinding between now and then.
Without very much feedback, like reinforcement that you're doing a great job.
Yeah, without feedback and like the huge amounts that are like, oh yeah, we can make a living off of this, or we can, like, this is really meeting the need, whatever. It's
Which
I
all successful people will tell you is easy
yeah,
to
there
do.
again, I think there's the American Idol effect on our culture of like, we want instant success, we want it to be
Yeah.
overnight, we want it, and it's like rare is that occasion.
Yeah.
um so I find it easier, yeah, honestly, like it's been easier to be myself than it has to, like, because you get tired, like content creation's exhausting when you've
Hmm.
got a whole bunch of other things you're trying to juggle. But yeah,
I
to
can't
to
believe how
in
many times I say like or
so
looking back at my videos.
that's the other perfectionistic thing, is to look at your past self with kindness and
Yes.
a chance to grow. And even the bizarre thing too of how God works, of like, I look back at past videos I've done with Ascension Presents, and things that I couldn't say today if I tried, or I couldn't say as eloquently, or advice that I said 3 years ago that's like I needed to hear today. That's the other wild thing of the internet, is you've
It
got
stays
videos,
around.
it stays around, and you've got video. I mean, that's the blessing and the curse of it, but like you've got Fulton Sheen homilies that people are gobbling up today, and words you said 3 to 5 years ago, God uses to reach someone today. So
It's
also
awesome.
to not discount, well, that video was pretty rough, or that, that lighting was horrible, or that was clunky, how I worded that. Like, don't doubt what God will do by us just showing up.
Yeah. It's awesome. Uh, I found that getting in, because my show is primarily an interviewing show. I don't pontificate. I don't have that much to say.
Yeah.
But I like talking with people, and I appreciate what can arise out of a dialogue with someone. But I think the challenge for me is getting into the flow with the uniqueness of each guest, and getting comfortable with a dialogue and a back and forth, and just encountering different personalities. And I can understand why show hosts have repeating guests, where
Mhm.
it just works and it just clicks. You want them to come back because you know what you're expecting.
There's a
But someone
chemistry.
new, yeah, and someone new, it takes a little time. Even in every single interview I've given so far, there's a difference between the 20-minute mark and the 40-minute mark, and just the warming up period is so important. And so it's a challenge for me to kind of catch the groove with the uniqueness of each person. I'm working on
And how much of that is just listening, but there's a chemistry element too.
Yeah.
Um, I hope this has been easy for you, Dr. Bryan.
It's great. Well, this is a great segue. Chemistry issue. What's it like working with your wife?
Next topic. So no, my wife and I are best friends,
Hold on.
and
Listen, I know you're going to say wonderful things about you and your wife. I know you're going to say wonderful things, and let's just take that as a given.
sure.
What would you say has been the
Do
most
you want?
frequent point of tension
Okay.
in working with your spouse? I also work with my wife, so
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. I was gonna get to the real talk. It's the navigating. When am I coworker and pushing to a deadline versus when do I need to be spouse? Like what hat am I wearing?
The hat, yes, the multiple relationships, and articulating which hat. Sometimes just saying it. I'm talking to you as your spouse.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you as your podcast host. That makes all the difference for the conversation, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I know the kids are crazy and you're tired. However, we need to record this by tomorrow. So how can we make this happen? Is honestly the most frequent, like what am I navigating? And that's also like kind of learning each other. Like I like to check things off. I like to feel accomplished, and I have a strong doer part that wants to look back on the week and look at the 37 things we did. And my wife is not like that.
Yeah.
So for her, it's like, we'll record when we record. And I'm like, well, we got to post by next Tuesday. So there's also the complementarity there, but it's usually the recognizing, no, my wife needs to rest. Like for the whole house is good, she needs to not record. That's the most frequent um, navigation I'm doing is what is best for the house and the family, which because that comes first. And I always want
Yeah.
whatever we do, ministry or content, to be an overflow of like our relationship and what God is doing in our hearts, and to not become a brand, to not become this machine, that
Yeah.
Satan's always on the prowl. And if he can get a married couple doing work together, doing ministry together, to just become this, like, we're doing the outer stuff, but we're not guarding or nourishing the inner stuff, you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful to have the love that you two share, which spirates into children at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
Also spirate into just love given to the world, and to bear fruit beyond just your home that other people can share in. It's a courageous thing to do because you guys are on. I guess I was going to say under the microscope on stage. People can look into your life, and has that ever been a point of contention? Do you have you encountered others who think they know your marriage or think they know your relationship or speak into it, or just the fact that you're being seen, does that create issues?
Thanks be to God, no, not for us. Not on a large scale at all. I feel like God's kind of protected us, or just kept us like um, out of that field, so to speak. Um, if we're very protective of our kids, let's say that, like, our kids are not props, like they're not featured very often at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you want to protect their lives, their autonomy, their privacy, so to speak. Um, I think for me, there's just like what I said earlier of like Satan's on the prowl, and he's eager to take down good priests, good clergy. He's just as eager to take down good marriages. And so I think knowing that also is that, like, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, make sure you're prayed up, make sure you and your spouse have ample time together, because the kids are exhausting. It's easy to have all your marital energy go towards the kids, and then you haven't had a date night in 4 months, So
Yeah.
there's
It's
always
got to be
that, like,
intentional.
yeah, recalibrating, like, okay, and we're quality time people, my wife and I, so we don't need, uh, you know, high, thankfully she doesn't need like the romancing date every 2 weeks, so to speak. But
Yeah.
for me, that can also slide into laziness. Like, oh, my wife knows I love her. It's like, no, but
Sure.
still take her on a date.
Yes. The flowers do matter once in a while.
Right.
Let's talk about integration. So, oftentimes I have to explain what I mean by integration to guests and to the audience. Uh, Broadly speaking, it's psychology and faith, right? Um, you have now been trained through the CP map, which many of our listeners probably don't know what that is. So, I work for Catholic Psych, and we provide an alternative service to traditional psychotherapy, which integrates the Catholic faith with the science of psychology. And we've been doing that successfully for a while. So we decided to start training other people to do it. And I think you were part of the first cohort ever, I believe. And so you've been doing this for roughly, a little over a year now. A little over a year. I know you have a history in ministry and you're very comfortable with matters of faith. Now that you have the psychology piece, what's integration to you now? How's it changed?
Yeah, I was blessed to be a part of the first cohort coming through the Catholic Psych Institute's model of applied personalism, which is bringing together solid, um, the best of psychology, I'd say, with a grounded Catholic anthropology and spirituality into a full, like, what is the human person? What do we mean by that? Like, what are we shooting for? Because I want to be a healthy, thriving human. Great. What is that? How do I know how to live a good life? Like, how do I know who I'm made to be? And the beauty of having like a solid like scaffolding of architecture of like you're called to greatness in the masculine genius you've been given, or the feminine genius you've been given, and let's figure out how that may be, um, that may have been wounded in your life, that calling to love and be loved, like how that may have been askew in your childhood and your examples of parenting, and how you've been wounded by a relationship, because we're made in the image and likeness of God, who is relationship, and we're healed by a relationship, even though we may be wounded and hurt by a relationship in the middle.
Yeah.
And what Catholic Psych, what this time and education is giving me, is just like, it's the toolbox underneath the toolbox. You lift it up and there's even more tools, and you're like, whoa, Dad, you got even more down here. It's that, like, I've been doing ministry ever since I got out of youth ministry, but to be given this new set of psychological tools in accompanying people and giving corrective emotional experiences
Oh, I
in
love it.
in
That's a
like,
buzzword.
yeah, in like parenting parts of a person. It's like, you've been holding on to this since you were 8. You're not 8 anymore, but you're reacting like you're 8. So let's talk about that. I mean, it's stuff that I had a glimpse of in my students, but it's just at such a deeper like pitch now. It's been such it's I am a better husband, father, and man because of my past year in this program.
Oh, that's so exciting. It's really great to hear. Yeah, and to look at how our history and our psychology and those relationships and those patterns and those dynamics are actually projected onto our spiritual life
Yeah.
is a unique thought. Oftentimes we have an idea of who God is. We're not actually talking about God. We're talking about our mom and dad. And our first experience of God that occurs when we're children, because everything we say about our parents as children, we eventually say about God: will you protect me? Will you guide me? Will you nurture me? Will you provide for me? So we take that early experience of God and assume that it's true about him later on. So if our parents hurt us in a particular way, we assume that God is going to hurt us in the same way. So unlocking some of our psychology helps our spiritual development. It's great.
Which I had a classmate in the seminary. I say again a lot, by the way. I realize that's my. I look back on videos.
Verbal tick. Yeah.
Yeah, and now a friend of mine pointed out. Both my wife and I do this. I don't know when we picked it up, but I haven't even made the first point. But I'll say again. Like, what am I referencing? My friend in seminary, he's now a priest, and I remember him rolling his eyes and be like, enough about the wounds, enough about the childhood wounds.
Mm.
And yet you realize, no, it's so much of the template for how we see the world, how we see God.
Even that's a defense, right? Enough
Yeah,
about the wounds.
yeah,
That is a defense.
which I knew, like, at the comedic level, like,
Yeah.
you want to talk about it, man? Like,
Yeah.
but it is a frustrating, like, why haven't I moved past this? Why can't we move past it? Because it's our very first template, and so it does take tremendous healing and vulnerability to go to these places.
What are you working on in yourself right now? We have this spirit of conversion in Catholic psych, where we're never a finished product. We're
Right.
always working on ourselves, and who we are affects our clinical work. So we emphasize working on yourself. So that might feel like an intrusive question to some of the people watching this, but that's common. That's a common exchange in our world, right? So what that being said, what are you working on right now?
No, it's par for the course. And as I referenced earlier, again, that perfectionistic part that is still wanting to do everything right the first time, that wants the document to be perfect as soon as it hits the Word doc.
What's the narrative? If it's not perfect, then
If it's not perfect, then I'm a fraud.
and if I'm a fraud,
Then I'm not lovable.
there we go. Good for you. You jumped right to the right to the core of it. Yeah.
And
No, it's true. It's earning love, right? It's such a. I'd say that's the
yeah,
most common theme of all the people that I've ever worked with. It's confusing what I can do or what my gifts are or my secondary characteristics with myself and my identity. And I'm only loved for those accidents versus substance, right? Like a good parent will communicate to a child, especially a father, that it is good that you exist. I'm happy you're here. No matter what you do, you're loved. And we know that. And we can say that about other people, but sometimes it just doesn't apply to us. And so I have to be good looking enough, smart enough, rich enough, holy enough, whatever. And then I will be loved. And if I'm not, I'm out in the cold.
it's crazy too because my parents never put this pressure on me. I feel like I've put this pressure on myself. It was never verbalized to me to get straight A's or to get into this college or I'm disappointed. It was this, like, look what I did, look what I can do, almost. And even that's like, where did that come from? So I'm still on this journey of, like,
I'm not sure how hard to push right now.
I know I can feel
I got to
feel it.
take my psychologist hat off and let you enjoy the conversation.
Put the
But go
gamer
on.
hat back on.
Yes.
Yeah, and man, it's and you think you've like hit the bottom. You're like, oh yeah, I've confronted that lie or I've gotten to the
Oh
bottom
yeah.
of that, and it's like, oh no, it's still there. It still
Nope.
can operate. It
And
can still hold me back from a place of real freedom.
not to diminish any work that you've already done on a particular issue.
Right.
It's just that there's more, right? Oftentimes we encounter clients that are like, I worked on my problems with my mom or my dad, and I'm good. We're done. I've forgiven them. It's like, well, I'm not so sure.
We're talking about it today, aren't we?
Yeah. And I don't, and I want to give you credit for doing that. You've done a lot of good work, and it's great.
Right.
And I'm glad you've forgiven them and processed some emotions, but there's probably some more to look at here, because oftentimes we see the effects and then induce the cause. It's like wind on the trees. Like, we can't see the wind, but we know it's there because the leaves are blowing. A lot of times we'll see that in people's behaviors, that we don't know exactly what happened, but we can see based on their behaviors that something indeed did happen.
And how you said earlier, and I've noticed this in ministry, like I can give the best advice to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
a student or someone comes up to me at an event, and I can give the best advice, like the most God ordained, like they need to hear, they're crying, and yet I can't receive it myself. Like,
Well, because you have emotions. It's easier to tell someone else to do something because there's no emotional investment for ourselves.
not even do something, to tell someone like they are a beloved child of God, like they are lovable just as they are. But me, but I can't make a mistake though.
Right. You can't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake.
Which can we? I'm not diverting. Can we throw that back to gaming for a sec? Is there like a
Sure.
chance? Is there a chance of attempting perfectionism?
Well, don't you see that with those speed runs? You ever go on YouTube and see people try and
Which is
speed run Mario Brothers,
which is
or
so
just
like
flawless?
I know, and I also like I'm repulsed at that, because like you're
Does it appeal to you though? Is there a part of you
no
that's like, no?
no, because it just robs the enjoyment of the game. Like,
No.
this was meant to be 60 hours, and you sped run it, like. But I mean, like the completionism, like you got 100%
Oh
on this
yeah.
mission, like
Achievements too. I think achievements,
mhm,
which are not part of. I mean, there's no reward in the game for achievements besides saying I completed a
exactly.
task.
I got a trophy.
Yeah. Right. Right. But I mean, most of the time there's a reward system where if I complete this, I become more powerful. But achievements are, it's just a list
Yeah.
it's probably like the fourth tab into the UI, you know. But yeah, I think people are attracted to that. I am not. I don't care about achievements.
Well,
You like them?
especially like a one-player game, it'll be like you achieve this. I'm like, who cares?
Right.
I'm not showing it to anyone.
Well, you don't play PC games, but have you heard of Steam before?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Steam allows you to download games online for your
Yeah,
computer.
my friend
And
has a Steam Deck.
yeah. And so for Steam, they like, as part of your profile, it'll say what percentage of games you've completed, including the achievements. So they know that it has to, like, you can still show off your achievements
Yeah.
in a certain context. Yeah. What's the next thing? This is an interesting question. And this may be an impossible question to ask you. It may be an unfair question to ask you. So you're talking about this perfectionism that you're working on now. What's the next thing that you have to work on that you're putting off?
How did you know? How did you know? There's another book manuscript I'm working on, and I have had the hardest time working on it.
Why?
I don't
You
know
have to
why.
tell us what it is.
I don't.
But what's the resistance? What's the internal resistance?
I don't know why. I'm trying to figure it out. And in fact, I listened to a podcast on procrastinating recently. It was like, why I'm procrastinating writing this book by listening to a podcast on procrastinating.
Is it too big in your mind?
It's a cocktail of it's too big, comparing myself to other authors, of like, what am I even trying to say? Who cares? Who's going to read it at the end of the day? Like, what difference is, like, oh man, there's a lot of negative self-talk.
All parts are welcome here.
I know.
You have a critical part that's just trying to protect you from being hurt. It's all good.
So yeah, this podcast, was talking about that. Like, it's a self-esteem mechanism. Like, procrastinating it doesn't make sense from a survival lens. Like, you're shooting yourself in the foot, but it's more of a self-esteem ego um, device to say, like, well, I could have done better if I had more time.
It
Yep.
doesn't make sense in terms of task completion, like looking outward, but in terms of within yourself, it's logical. Like I said, it's preventing you from sometimes it's taking on something too big, or you have these voices that are trying to protect you from being rejected. If you have this other part that's perfectionistic, that's saying I can't make a mistake, and then there's a lot of risk of making mistakes in your next project, well, let's just hold off on that for a bit. It's understandable.
I'm wondering, even, how did you know? This is like the thing that's weighing on me as of late is,
I mean, listen, you wanted to pray to the Holy Spirit before we started. Don't blame me.
well, I shouldn't be surprised. And also, we had a new baby, and I'm not making an excuse. And I genuinely thought this is the easy stage before he's moving. Like, I'll have no problem finishing this first draft before he's crawling. But the problem is he's very, like, needy. Babies are needy. Go figure. He just wants to be held.
Some, right?
Yeah, this kid wants to be held. He wants to be upright. He wants me to, like, walk around with him. So I'll do stuff one-handed, but that has also been,
It's hard to focus.
yeah, it's thrown me for a loop in a beautiful way of surrendering to say, okay, God, help me be okay with this. Like, help me love my son, like, to not get frustrated
And
at
and
this.
God you and God uses where we are psychologically, right?
Yeah,
So perhaps you have some personal hangups that you need to work through, but from a providential perspective, it's not the time to work on the project, right?
right,
And maybe
right.
he's slowing you down by giving you an active son. And that's fine. In terms of the big picture of your entire life, not yet, right? What a great segue. You'll
Not
see
yet.
them again, but not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Let's talk about Gladiator.
Dr. Bryan, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
It's true. That's a constant theme throughout. I mean, I even as the film begins and he's walking through the field of grass with his fingers like brushing up against it. I mean, it's ultimately the last scene,
Mhm.
and it plays with ideas of time and eternity and beginnings and endings and participating in divine realities while still in time and space. And yeah, spiritual film. Why'd you pick it?
It's my go-to um, film of, if I only had one movie, that's it.
That's number one.
It's number one.
High praise.
Yeah, I mean, from soundtrack to story, to execution, and I'll tell you, and you can psychoanalyze this till the cows come home. I saw this movie when I was 17 with my dad. The first rated R movie I saw. This movie I saw with my dad when I was 17, and it was this, like, male initiation of sorts. Like, this is what it looks like to be a man.
Yeah. I mean, certainly Maximus embodies some type of masculinity. I mean, he's an interesting character. He's an archetype for competency, for courage, not that much fear. He pretty much faces death, just by looking it in the eye. Um, just like a real overt engagement with that which is evil. Strength and honor, right? That's his pledge to all of his soldiers. He's a leader that is willing to risk himself. He doesn't sit behind the safety of his lines. the most danger. I was watching that first scene, and he was talking about firing the arrows, and Quintus is like, well, that's going to cause a risk for the cavalry, and he's like, a necessary risk. And you don't know at that moment that he's in the cavalry.
Right.
Like, he leads that charge. And I think soldiers often respect those leaders who are willing to get down and dirty with them, just like a child respects the parent who does the task that they're making the child do when the child doesn't want to do it, when they do it with them. So take the trash out because I said so. Well, that doesn't work. I don't want to take the trash out. Okay, you don't have to take it out. Permissive parenting, that's the other extreme, right? The healthy parenting is, I know you don't want to take the trash out. I know you've had a hard day. But I want to teach you responsibility, so go take it out. And I'm going to walk out and take it out with you. So I'm not lording over you. I would not ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And that's what I think Maximus embodies. And that's why he commands so much loyalty from his troops.
He knows his men. He's willing to not just be in there with him, but lead the charge.
Yes.
And then the zero desire for vainglory afterwards. It was usually whoever got to Caesar, whoever got to the king first would claim the credit for the battle,
Yeah.
And Maximus wants none of it.
No, he just wants to go home.
Wants to go home.
See his boy, make love to his wife, till his fields, reap the harvest.
Too, and if I'm ever tight-lipped about Jackie and I, if I'm ever like some people are much more gushy about their significant other.
Yeah.
There's time and place for it, and in my own like interior journey, like, okay, I've integrated some kind of stoicism that like is almost maybe too rigid of masculinity, that I've had to kind of look at and examine. But there's their moment where he's like, what do you say to your son, who at this point his son and his wife have been killed, and his friend's like, do you like pray for them? He's like, yeah. And he's like, what do you say to your son? You believe you'll meet them again? He said, I tell him to ride with his heels low and whatever. He's like, and what do you say to your wife? He's like, that is not your business.
And they laugh together.
They laugh together, and there's this common male to male moment of like, this is sacred between a husband and wife, and there's times to affirm and gush and show the world how proud I am of my wife, but there's a lot of things that's no one else's business.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about some characters here. Thoughts on Proximo? What do you think of Proximo?
Proximo is a delight, which he's kind of
He's
like
funny.
He's funny.
He's very funny.
I'm trying to not get into movie trivia, but he passes away before the movie's done, right?
You mean the actor?
The actor passed away before the completion of the movie.
No, I did not know that.
The final scene where he's getting stabbed, it's from the back. It's actually a different actor getting stabbed. From the front, it's like a reused footage from underneath the Colosseum, where he looks up and says shadows and dust. And if you look, you can see the soldiers standing on the side of him don't match the centurion sent to kill him.
Oh, interesting. I did not.
So
I didn't know that. It's cool.
Yeah, movie trivia. But as a character, as one who again is just kind of, I've paid my dues, I'm free, I'm here to make a living and have pleasure, through Maximus growing a moral compass. Like, the emperor killed the man who set you free.
And that was the turning point? Because
it
seemed to me it felt a little quick from I'm just here to make money to I'm willing to die to set Maximus free.
Sure. There's a director's cut of the film too, which elongates more of the senators and their workings to undermine um, um,
Commodus.
Commodus.
Yeah.
Proximo, I think he gets a little more footage, but I think it is kind of a quicker turn.
It's a corrective emotional experience.
Yeah, and I think if nothing else, that is that moment of like, this is what Commodus did, and if nothing
Hmm.
else moves you, just know this. So
Hmm.
whether or not he knew it was going to lead to his death, you got to imagine it probably did at that moment. He
Sure.
unlocked the gates for Maximus anyway.
Well, they saw him, right? They saw him do that, so he knew he was signing his own death warrant right there.
But at that point, I think too, there's the moment of like, all I have left is pleasure.
Hmm.
I've tasted enough of it, so I guess I'll die for something good.
Yeah. Oh, it's noble.
This,
What does Maximus say to him? Are you in danger of becoming a good man?
yeah,
Something like that.
and he just scoffs and walks away.
Yeah. He doesn't like it. Let's talk about Commodus. I mean,
One of the best like three-dimensional villains in that
I
in that sense of like how he's embodied by Joaquin Phoenix.
I don't think that movie is nearly as good with a different actor. I think his acting carries the film. I think uh, Maximus has an important stoicism about him.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the Batman character, which needs the Joker.
Right.
And he was, I mean, the range. And I remember watching this. I mean, now incest isn't a big deal in film, right? I mean, you have Game of Thrones now, but I remember when that first came out. That was pushing boundaries with his sister and his desire for her, and there's a creepiness about him,
Mm-hmm.
and he was terrifying. He's terrifying and unpredictable villain, and also immature, very immature. Those moments where things don't go his way, he is a little boy.
Right.
And overall, he's a little boy.
I mean, it's the tragic, crying for just the affirmation and love of his father to the
Yes.
point where he will commit patricide.
Well, right before he kills him is that interesting moment. He says, Marcus Aurelius is on his knees and he says, "Your faults as a son are my failures as a father." He says that in response to Commodus saying, "Hey, I may not have these virtues, but can you love me for these virtues? Like, am I lovable? Affirm my existence." And his father says, "No, you're a failure, but it
I
is my
know.
fault." It's like it's actually a criticism,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then he kills him.
Yeah. And then rewatching, it's like, your existence is my failure as a dad. It's like, that doesn't help.
It's happening and it's happening right now. It's the most meta of statements. He is failing him in that moment when when Commodus is the most vulnerable. His father is failing him by not saying, "I love you and you are good." He's saying, "You're a failure."
Well, and how Maximus is fathered by Marcus Aurelius.
Maybe.
Man, I mean,
I've got. Go ahead.
in the sense of like, whatever fatherly energy he had went to Maximus.
Right. And I'm actually kind of hard on Marcus Aurelius
Sure.
because he basically got to reap the harvest of another father's hard work
Hmm.
in having a good son in Maximus. He did. I mean, sure, he was fatherly to him once he became a soldier and a general, but it's not as if he was, emotionally present to Maximus during his early development, like he wasn't to Commodus. Like he is a failed father, and he's a bit narcissistic. Father, love me. Well, it's my fault that you suck. Like, I don't know. Marcus Aurelius the Wise, I think he had his flaws. And even his daughter, he said, "Would you, what kind, you would be a cunning," I think he said you'd be a cunning Caesar, but
Caesar, yeah.
but would you be just? And she says, "I would be whatever you want me to be." Isn't that the words of a child of a narcissistic parent? I'm not so high on him. I think he had some issues. And I mean, he's probably an emotionally distant dad. I think being Caesar, I have compassion for him. Being Caesar probably comes with a lot of temptation to believe your own hype. I get it. You're the ruler of 25% of the global population, and you've conquered and conquered and conquered, and you get to this point of disillusionment in your elder years. What is it all for? But all along the way, I mean, I imagine he wasn't a family man.
And there's film Caesar, there's historical Caesar, who knows, the in between. But even just looking at like the modern British royal family, it's like wounds on top of wounds. And
Yes, good
can
point.
anyone nourish a family with that kind of limelight and they come out healthy and integrated? I don't know. Like I think but you have to be so intentional about it. But
So intentional.
yeah, I mean, you watch the film as a young man, and it's a cool movie.
Yes.
The action's great, and there's the stoic masculine embodied on screen who knows his identity, who's fights to his last breath, is inspiring. And then you watch it years later with the eyes of being a dad and more psychology in your toolbox, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like father wounds left and right. And Maximus as the model of, well, let's not say model, but like a figure of security. Like he knows who he is, and that's why that speech he gives is so like resonating for men. It's like, my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius,
Hmm.
commander of the Felix legions, armies of the north, husband to a murdered wife, father to a murdered son, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. It's like, that's a guy who knows who he is.
Yes. I wanted to talk to you about that. Vengeance and revenge. I you know, I couldn't help but think that this is the precursor to John Wick. That this film, like John Wick, is essentially the same premise. And it's a badass, hyper masculine, highly skilled warrior slash assassin that wins almost no matter what, wins every fight, and kills a lot of people along the way out of love for a dead spouse.
Right, right, right.
And so how do you so it's interesting, this play on vengeance and mercy. Even Commodus was not actually merciful,
Mm,
but he thought that he could earn love by mimicking mercy, the mercy of Maximus, which I don't know that it really was as much as it was defiance of the emperor in that moment. But then he was coined Maximus the Merciful, and
right.
so Commodus is like, wait a second, I can be merciful too. Right? Remember when he spares the daughter? Am I not merciful? It's one of those famous lines from the film. Am I not merciful? That and are you not entertained? Those resound throughout film history. But mercy is an interesting thing, and this is a movie about revenge. How do you reconcile that with your Catholic faith?
Mm. Being put on the spot, I don't know. Um,
Well, okay. Well, I don't. I'm not. I don't. I don't want to expect like this, like well developed, thoughtful answer. But just as you're sitting here, how have you? Do you sort of? Is that a secondary detail for you? You don't actually haven't really thought through whether or not that's the most Catholic, or is there? Could we see it as? I mean, we could delve into that and say, well, maybe it's more justice than revenge. But just in your historical viewing of it, have you thought about the vengeance dimension? Are you a vengeful man? Do
I
you
guess
identify with it? Like,
maybe this, it was like when you asked me pick a movie, it was either Gladiator or The Dark Knight. So I mean, Vengeance or Hans Zimmer as the soundtrack was going to play a pivotal role in the decision.
yeah,
Those are some of my two favorite movies. Um, Joaquin Phoenix would go on to play the Joker later, so that's a funny thread,
yeah,
connective tissue there.
yeah,
I think with Maximus, there's not this like long thought out, I will do this, which will lead to this, which will lead me to get before the emperor. I think he's just continually put in these positions where this is now what I have to do to survive, and it keeps putting him closer to the emperor.
Mhm.
And so it's not this like long drawn thought out plan of vengeance. It's more what is being placed before him, and trying to do the honorable thing, even to the point it's more self-defense at a certain point.
Yeah, I think
Then
there's interesting conceptions of honor, because remember when Commodus says to his sister, if he's threatening to take her son's life, and one of the threats he tosses her way is, if you choose to do the honorable thing and take your own life,
right.
I will kill your son. So we would say maybe not honorable to commit suicide, but the virtues of the time might be slightly different, right? Because he was an honorable man.
How honors, yeah, changed in time and throughout cultures for sure. But maybe this is where I have room to grow, is I've never looked at Gladiator as like a long like tale of vengeance. I think it
It's
plays
a
it.
tale of justice.
I'd say maybe justice. Like it plays out that way. Like he's sold into slavery. Well, he's left for dead. He's sold into slavery, and he just happens to keep incrementally getting closer and closer by just trying to survive to the emperor.
Yes.
Um, and it's this. If I can make this really big leap to, um, like Walter Ciszek and like God, He Leadeth Me, or with God in Russia, there is this like, I am now a slave. What can I do but survive? Like just make it from one moment to the next moment. Um, to like even like despair of like, I'm a slave. What possible difference can I make? And it's
Yeah,
like
he says
by
that. Yeah.
you living one more day gives more people hope.
That's what the senator warned Commodus about. Just kill him. Every day he's alive is a defiance of you.
Right. And he doesn't want to make a martyr out of Maximus. And so he has to. And I mean, one of my favorite lines too, I'm glad I didn't forget this, is when his friend tells him, he's like, you have a great name. They will have to
Mm.
kill your name before they kill you.
Yes.
And isn't that like just the like our name, our reputation, like who we are, our honor as men? Like if you lose that, it's so hard to regain it. And we're in such a trigger happy cancel culture now, where if you do something, a whiff of, you may not even done anything wrong, but if you get accused or if you get whatever, it's like your name is tarnished. That just the power of like in your name. And I have friends too that go down the rabbit hole of like your name having like the etymology of your name having like divine mission attached to it, and that can be there. But just like the power in like your name, I love it.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And I think Commodus knew this. That's why he did not want to make a martyr out of him. And he knew that he would lose the mob if he just killed him. And so the only way that he could actually solve the problem of Maximus was to have a memorable death in which he defeats him in one-on-one combat. He knew that that was his only play left because he was aware of the name. Commodus wasn't an idiot. He was very sharp. He was just a boy, I think. I think he was a boy. And he's sad, really. You know what's interesting is when I talk to my wife about her choice, your choice in film, I asked her if she'd ever seen it. Has you ever see Gladiator? She said, yeah, I saw it. She said it's a sad film, and that's not typically the male response.
Isn't that's fascinating?
Yes, she said, yeah, it's a sad film. So I think the way she would, what she highlights when viewing the film is it's tough for her to get past the murdering of his wife and son, and the sadness associated with that loss, and him being driven, by that loss for most of the film. I mean, of course, it's a happy ending. He reunites with them in the next life, but her big takeaway was it's sad. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Men will have it as like one of the most masculine movies ever made. Your wife says it's sad. But even like the final speech, like, is Rome worth one good man's life? Like, honor him. Every time it's like, yes, and you pray like I just pray like to that's also too like I you want to be that kind of man. Um, there's that the Saving Private Ryan at the very end, where he's by the graveside, and his friends, his soldiers have passed on. And he looks at his wife. He's like, "Am I a good man? Like, have I earned the life I've been given?" And there's that like the beckoning of, "Am I a good man? Like, have I lived a life worth honoring?" And then to the
Yeah.
Christian point of like, have so yeah, to the Christian point of the desire to hear that, "Well done, good and faithful servant," at the end of all things. To then the perfectionistic part of me, it's like, have I done enough to earn that "Well done, good and faithful servant,"
Affirmation.
that affirmation? And it's not about earning it. It's about being it. It's about allowing yourself to be loved, like filled up with the grace of God, to allow any disordered attachments to be burned away. It's not about have I won enough battles. It's not about my accolades. Have I earned that final trophy? Have you received the Father's love?
Yeah, and all those tasks are secondary to who you are. I mean, who you are, you carry that with your cross contexts. So the affirmation for who you are is like the ultimate affirmation. So whether it's this battle or the next or this task or whatever it is, it's just good that you exist and who you are carries with you. So that's what that affirmation is about. It's who you are that I'm
Yeah.
happy about, that I'm proud of. That's what we all long for. That's the Father's blessing. And Maximus gets it. How do you feel about the dream of Rome? Talk a lot about the dream of what Rome is, the Republic of Rome.
My friends and I quote that all the time. Like, there was a dream once that was America. You could only whisper it, and it would be gone. Like, and apply that to the church, apply that to whatever, like the whatever dysfunctional organization, school, like company you may be in. Like, there was a dream once that was X. Like, you could only
Mm.
whisper it. Um,
It's a bit
yeah,
utopian, isn't it?
it is. But don't we need something to strive for? Like, don't we need the ideals in a way?
Yes. Yeah, I think we've lost sight of them in our culture. I think at a large scale level, where we have very little trust in very few institutions, including the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of criticism, even if you're a practicing Catholic, there's a lot of distrust for church leadership and church authority. And so to believe in, I mean, ultimately you have to believe in the divine dimension of the church alongside the human dimension of it to have any trust whatsoever. But there are no models anymore. There are very few role models to look up to. So even on a personal level, there are no ideals. There are very few archetypes left to try and emulate. You know, I was actually going to ask you this earlier, but we just never got around to it. So you were 17 when you saw this. I was going to ask you who were your childhood heroes. I imagine Maximus was a childhood hero, but even outside of film, uh, who were they, and have they stood up to the scrutiny as you've grown older? I know for me, my big one was Hulk Hogan, like Hulkamania Hulk Hogan,
Mhm.
not
Oh, yeah.
NWO Hulk Hogan, and he's actually become an amazing Christian now who's turned his life around. I listened to him on Joe Rogan not too long ago. But for a long time, he was living a pretty corrupt life. And as I grew older, I was like, what happened to Hulkamania? Like I lived my life based on Hulkamania. Do you have anyone?
I mean, I had my dad, in all honesty. There wasn't mm, there wasn't many like celebrities I look can say I looked up to in the culture. It's been more fictional characters, honestly. It's been the Bruce Waynes. It's been the Maximus. So that's even interesting, like saying that out loud. Like there wasn't any celebrity that I looked up to that I was crushed by when I discovered.
Well, Hulkamania was a fictional character too.
Sure.
It wasn't the real Hulk Hogan. And I think, I mean, the reason why I want to explore art and the projections that we have onto art and ask people what their favorite films are is because I think that the psychological impact, especially during our youth, is not explored well enough and is underrated. To this day, as I get older and balder and fatter and less competent, and there's less space for me on a battlefield than there used to be. Now, what is competency for me? Competency for me now is wisdom. That's a core male question. I mean, that goes right back to Dagobah and Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
That first modeling for me of that's what I wanted to become. And that's what like somewhere in my mind, the grandfather figure was always there as a man or a masculine figure worthy of respect. And it came from fiction. And so I think art plays such a pivotal role in our development. I don't think we give it enough attention.
And Star Wars, this is another hour conversation, but that's like loaded with archetypes. But my kids watching Empire for the first time were just dying laughing at Yoda. And when you don't know anything about Yoda, like he is such a little punk at the onset of that movie because he's just stealing food and hitting R2, and it's like the comedic element is great.
But the humility, it was his power was hidden. And in 1979, or I forget which Empire came out. I think it was 79.
Yep.
No one knew, and you're watching that scene for the first time. You didn't know that he was a powerful Jedi. Like the humility that came with that character, just always admire it.
Which I think so many films have lost because, like, Gladiator was, fantastic, and some years later, 300 came out, and that for me was a noticeable turn in, like, the hyper masculine. Like Maximus
bloodthirsty.
Maximus didn't need 6-pack abs. But from that movie on, from 300 on, from that point on, like every superhero, every male action star, like it just has gotten progressively more like jacked or unrealistic, or to your point, like the wise figures. I see less and less of them.
Yes.
It's more these caricatures.
Or they're not male. There's a lot of female wise figures out there in film, but you don't find a lot of males left. Or they're like I just watched this television series, Ahsoka, and it's there's a droid in it. That's the wisdom figure. That is technically male, but it's not a human being.
Right.
It's a droid.
Right.
Right. So it's hard to find. Well, I'm gonna keep striving for it. Hopefully, I'll get there.
You just need a cane and a swamp, and you're almost there. Yeah.
That's the dream. All right. Well, Bobby, thanks. This has been really great.
Dr. Bryan, it's been an honor and a pleasure, and we could go on for another hour. We should probably call it there.
Yeah, but plug everything. Plug everything. Plug the podcast. You got the book coming out.
Yeah, the book is out, Gaming and the Heroic Life, with Ave Maria Press. My wife and I have been doing ministry. We travel and we speak. We have a website, JackieandBobby.com. We're on Ascension Press. We have a solo podcast called Conversations. And I recently became certified through Catholic Psych as a mentor. So I'm continuing to walk with people under that umbrella, and very thankful for the ministry that God has called me to, and just trying to, not earn the Father's love, but just be loved and radiate that onward. What I do in this life echoes in eternity.